In the autumn of 1888, a shadow fell over the grimy, gaslit streets of London's East End, a darkness deeper than the coal-choked fog that clung to the cobblestones. This wasn't just crime. This was something monstrous, a new kind of fear that would forever be etched into the city's soul. They called him Jack the Ripper. But who was he, and why, over a century later, does his name still send a shiver down our spines? Let's journey back to Victorian London and unravel one of history's most terrifying and enduring mysteries. The story begins in Whitechapel, a district teeming with poverty, desperation, and vice. It was a place of crowded slums, gin palaces, and dark, narrow alleyways where the poorest of the poor struggled to survive. In this labyrinth of despair, a killer began his gruesome work. His victims were women who worked the streets, vulnerable and forgotten by society. The first, Mary Ann Nichols, was found on August 31st. Her death was brutal, but it was only the beginning. Just over a week later, Annie Chapman was discovered. The violence had escalated. The killer wasn't just murdering these women. He was mutilating them with a terrifying, almost surgical precision. Panic began to spread through Whitechapel like a plague. The police were baffled. They flooded the streets, interviewing hundreds of people. But the killer was like a phantom, leaving no clues but his horrific handiwork. The press, sensing a sensational story, dubbed him the Leather Apron, a local bogeyman. But the real name that would stick was yet to come. Then came the double event on September 30th. In a single night, the Ripper claimed 2 more victims, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Edwards. The city was thrown into a state of sheer terror. How could one man commit to such heinous acts in different locations, with police patrols everywhere, and simply vanish into the night? It was after this night that the killer himself decided to join the conversation. A letter, written in red ink and boasting of his crimes, was sent to the Central News Agency. It was filled with taunts and chilling promises of more to come. It was signed Jack the Ripper. This letter, whether a genuine message from the killer or a cruel hoax, changed everything. It gave the phantom a name, a personality. Jack was no longer just a shadow. He was a character, a cunning and arrogant monster who mocked the police and terrified the public. Newspapers printed the letter, and the name Jack the Ripper became infamous overnight. The media frenzy was unprecedented. Theories ran wild. Was he a doctor? A butcher? A madman? Some even whispered he was a member of the upper class. Even royalty, slumming it in the dark alleys of the East End. The police were under immense pressure. They employed new techniques like crime scene photography and even brought in bloodhounds, though that attempt ended in a comical failure when the dogs got lost. Vigilante groups like the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, led by George Lusk, patrolled the streets, hoping to catch the killer themselves. Lusk even received his own terrifying packaja, small box containing half a human kidney, accompanied by a note that began from hell. The writer claimed he had fried and eaten the other half. It was believed to be from Catherine Edo's body. The terror had reached a fever pitch. The Ripper's final canonical victim was Mary Jane Kelly. Her death on November 9th was the most horrific of all. She was killed indoors, in her small room on Miller's Court. This gave the killer time, and what he did to her was beyond comprehension. The scene was so gruesome that seasoned police officers were physically sick. After the horror of Mary Jane Kelly's murder, the killings suddenly stopped. Just as mysteriously as he appeared, Jack the Ripper vanished. So, who was he? The list of suspects is long and fascinating. there was Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher who was found drowned in the Thames shortly after the last murder. Was it a suicide born of guilt? Then there was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish Jewish hairdresser who lived in Whitechapel and suffered from severe mental illness. He was a prime suspect for one of the lead investigators at the time. Another compelling suspect is Surin Kalasowski, also known as George Chapman. He was a poisoner who murdered 3 of his wives and was hanged in 1903. An inspector who worked the Ripper case famously said, "You've got Jack the Ripper at last," upon his arrest. Even famous figures have been linked to the case. Some have pointed to Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, based on anagrams found in his writing, a theory that's largely dismissed. A more persistent theory involves the royal family, suggesting a conspiracy to cover up the scandalous affairs of Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson. This theory, while popular in books and movies, has very little evidence to support it. More recently, DNA evidence has entered the picture. A shawl, said to have been found near Catherine Nadeau's body, has been tested multiple times. One study pointed to Aaron Kosminski, while another suggested the DNA evidence was contaminated and unreliable. The truth is, after all this time, the science is inconclusive. Every piece of evidence seems to lead to another dead end, another theory, another argument. So why are we still so obsessed with Jack the Ripper? It's because the case is the perfect storm of mystery. It has a terrifying, almost supernatural villain who was never caught. It's set in a foggy, atmospheric time that feels both historical and like a gothic horror story. And at its heart is a puzzle with a missing piece: the identity of the killer. The Ripper's legacy is a dark one. He was one of the first serial killers to become a media sensation. His crimes highlighted the horrific poverty and social conditions of Victorian London's East End. But most importantly, the story of Jack the Ripper is a chilling reminder that sometimes the monster is not a mythical beast, but a man who walked among us, committed unspeakable acts, and then faded back into the crowd, taking his secret with him to the grave. His identity remains London's greatest mystery, a ghost that still haunts its streets. What do you think? Who was Jack the Ripper? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this dive into history's dark side, be sure to like and subscribe for more.